Another very lovely evening to all of you. Once again, I'm ever so thankful that you all could join me. We left off at the end of Judges 1 with it was Dan and the Amalekites were having conflict, but really all the remaining Canaanites were vexing Israel in some way or another. It's because they're starting to fall away from the Lord after Joshua. Judges 2 picks up right here. Very profound event happens right off the bat in Judges 2. And an angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt. I made you to go up out of Egypt, and have brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. Now, there is the possibility that this angel of the Lord was simply a messenger reiterating what God told them to say, and they're just using, I said this and I said that. Or, as the commentators pretty much across the board believe, that this was Christ himself. Alexander McLaren said the angel of the Lord had appeared to Joshua in Gilgal at the beginning of the war. Remember, right before they go into to take Jericho? Well, here he is again, after Joshua, at the beginning of the war, and issued his orders as the captain of the Lord's host. Now he appears to ask why his orders had not been carried out, and to announce that victory was no longer to attend Israel's arms. To which the location of where this angel appears is not far at all from Gilgal, because it actually comes down, and I believe it's the Son of God. He comes down from Gilgal to Bochum. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare unto you. Matthew Henry commented, those who throw off communion with God and have fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness know not what they do now, and will have nothing to say for themselves in the day of account shortly. Meaning, you don't really understand totally what you're doing whenever you either begin to backslide or totally reject God. You don't fully understand what that is entailing. Those deceive themselves who expect advantages from friendship with God's enemies. That is such a good point. If you'll look at the governments of the world, you have the Nancy Pelosi's and all these huge aboard Biden and Harris. You have all these horrible, horrible people, these celebrities, and they're all virtue signaling, and they do evil all the time without end. But they have no idea really in what kind of danger that they're in. And it came to pass when the angel of the Lord spake these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochum, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord. And when Joshua had let the people go, after giving his final speech, the children of Israel went every man into his inheritance to possess the land. Jameson Fawcett Brown said, this passage is a repetition of Joshua 24. It was inserted here to give the reader the reasons which called forth so strong and severe rebuke from the angel of the Lord. So this is just a reminder. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord that he did for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnath-Serah, in the mount of Ephraim, on the north side of the hill Gaash. And also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there arose another generation after them which knew not the Lord. Now this is the generation that the angel spoke to them about. Nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. Pulpit commentary said, the memory of God's great works gradually faded away, and with this memory their influence upon the hearts of the people. The seductions of idolatry and the influence of heathen example were ever fresh and powerful. Just like us, they see these evil influences on a daily basis, sometimes moment by moment, depending on where you work, who you hang out with, and what. We may notice by the way the value to the church of the sacrament of the Lord's Supper. Remember, communion is what it's speaking of, in keeping alive a perpetual memory of Christ's precious death until his coming again. Communion is that reminder of his sacrifice, and that's the reason why Christ told us take communion. That way this is refreshed upon us, just as he desired fresh remembrances and memorials to be given unto Israel, like we're discussing right now. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. This is such strong language whenever I started to look into this. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of spoilers that spoiled them, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies. Matthew Henry once again said, "They serve the gods of the nations round about them, even the meanest. And God made them serve the princes of the nations round about them, even the meanest." I love this quote, "Those who have found God true to his promises may be sure that he will be as true to his threatenings. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn unto them, and they were greatly distressed." Not just distressed, greatly distressed. "Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges." Now here's the first real mention of judges, "which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them." Cambridge said, "Judges, not in the sense of magistrates like we would know of as a judge. Well, I got to go stand before the judge tomorrow and all that. Judges, not in the sense of magistrates, for there was no law or tribunal in our sense at a period when every man did that which was right in his own eyes," which is the motto of Judges. The judges were champions and leaders. They were generals and war chiefs, called out to meet a special emergency, who vindicated Israel's rights in battle. And yet they would not hearken unto their judges, but they went a whoring after other gods, and bowed themselves unto them. They turned quickly out of the way which their fathers walked in, obeying the commandments of the Lord. But they did not so. Cambridge also said this about them going whoring after other gods like a prostitute. Well, that may not be such a figurative statement. Cambridge said, as prostitution was a common feature of these Semitic Baal worship and Ashtaroth worship, these demon worships, prostitution was common among them. The words may have been used originally in a literal sense and afterwards metaphorically, so they were even giving their bodies over to all types of horrid acts, and which they still do this to this day. And when the Lord raised them up judges, then the Lord was with the judge, and delivered them out of the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For it repented the Lord because of their groanings by reason of them that oppressed them and vexed them. And it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers. That really struck me. They were even worse afterwards than their fathers, and following other gods to serve them and to bow down unto them. They ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn way. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he said, because that this people hath transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice. That so reminds me of Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Here's one of Edwards' quotes about hell and the damned while they're still alive on earth. And I believe that this is one of the main reasons why people go back into idolatry. They go back into evil. Even after all the goodness that God has done for them, they still go back. And I believe this is one of the keys to it. Almost every natural man that hears of hell flatters himself that he shall escape it. Even atheists believe that they'll not wind up in hell. Even atheists, I remember whenever I was an atheist, I thought to myself, well, if there is a God, he's not going to send me to hell. I've never murdered anyone. I've never done this and that. But now that I know that it's not about our works and how we're all filthy, filthy sinners, if you sin once, you deserve eternal hell. But here's another terrifying quote from Jonathan Edwards. The bow of God's wrath is bent, and the arrow made ready on the string, and justice bends the arrow at your heart and strains the bow, and it is nothing but the mere pleasure of God, and that of an angry God, without any promise or obligation at all, that keeps the arrow one moment from being made drunk with your blood. These people have no idea what kind of position that they're just like me as an atheist. You just live blind, like a blind man surrounded by venomous snakes and beasts and horrid things, wolves everywhere and demons. I mean, you're just blind. You can't see it. Therefore, you just live all happy-go-lucky and you're just surrounded by danger. I also will not henceforth drive out any from before them of the nations which Joshua left when he died, that through them I may prove Israel, whether they will keep the way of the Lord to walk therein as their fathers did keep it or not. Now remember this word prove right here. We're about to come up on here just a couple verses. We're about to come up on that word again, but these are two different meanings. This one has to do with testing their faith. Therefore the Lord left those nations without driving them out hastily, neither delivered he them into the hand of Joshua. Now these are the nations which the Lord left to prove Israel by them, even as many of Israel as had not known all the wars of Canaan. So here we see this word prove again. Now this is pretty significant, really. Pulpit says this word to prove is used here in a somewhat different sense from that which it bears in verse 4, which is coming up, and in Judges 2:22, like we just read. In those passages, it is used of their moral probation, of proving or testing their faith and obedience. But here, in verse 1 of chapter 3, but here it is rather in the sense of to exercise or to accustom them, to train them to war. You see, before, God wanted to prove and test their faith. Once that they failed that test, now God is saying, get ready for war. Now you're going to have to fight. Only that the generations of the children of Israel might know to teach them war at the least, such as before knew nothing thereof. Namely, 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites that dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Abel Hermon unto the entering in of Hamath. And they were to prove Israel by them, to know whether they would hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. And the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites, and Perizzites, and Hivites, and Jebusites. And they took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their gods. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgat the Lord their God, and served Balaam and the groves. I do believe that so much of this has to do with people being so fickle in their worship. Jesus says you will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Worship him in spirit and in truth. Paul the Apostle says we walk by faith, not by sight. Spirit is invisible. Therefore, my point in this is they have to seemingly have something visible to worship, whether it be a statue. They can even call that statue God. I mean, meaning the true God, and yet it's still idolatry all around. The Catholics do this all the time. They have made a whole religion based around that. Therefore, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, and the children of Israel served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. Now right up here, as you'll see, Mesopotamia, this would have been, around over here is Israel, so you can get a general scope of it. And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, and whom we discussed in the last study. Adam Clark said Othniel had already signalized his valor in taking Kirjath Sepher, which appears to have been a very hazardous exploit. Remember, to get Caleb's daughter, he had to take that. By his natural valor, experience in war, and the peculiar influence of the divine spirit, he was well qualified to inspire his countrymen with courage and to lead them successfully against their oppressors. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon Othniel, and he judged Israel and went out to war, and the Lord delivered Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hand, and his hand prevailed against Cushan Rishathaim. And the land had rest 40 years, and Othniel the son of Kenaz died. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. Right here, we've went over Moab so many times. Moab right here, and Ammonites up here. But the Amalekites would also be all around, really, Canaan, but they would join league with the two. And he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel, and possessed the city of palm trees. The city of palm trees, once again, it's Jericho, right across the Jordan, right here. But Ammon, if you'll recall, Ammon and Moab each descended from Lot's daughters. Remember, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, they get him drunk and he has sex with his daughters, and then they have these children. Well, the children would come out and be the beginning of Ammon and Moab. And Sodom being right down here, they didn't really go too far to start spreading out. But what about Amalek? I've often questioned about Amalek. You hear an awful lot about Amalek, the Amalekites, but what about them? Where did they come from? Pulpit once again says, the Amalekites appear from Genesis 36:12 to have been a branch of the Edomites, and the latest mention of them in the Bible finds a remnant of them in the neighborhood of Mount Seir in the days of Hezekiah, 1 Chronicles, so it's believed that maybe they are a branch from Esau, his descendants, the Edomites. But anyway, all three of these nations, the Ammonites, Moabites, and Amalekites, they're all coming against Israel, and they actually subdue Israel for a time. So the children of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. Now this would be to assassinate Eglon. Pulpit commentary said that it was peculiar of the warriors of the tribe of Benjamin to be left-handed. A left-handed man wearing no sword or dagger on his left side and using his right hand for other purposes would naturally throw a man off his guard. But Ehud made him a dagger, which had two edges of a cubit length, so roughly that long. It's like a small sword, pretty much. And he did gird it under his raiment upon his right thigh. And he brought the present unto Eglon, king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. And when he had made an end to offer the present, he sent away the people that bare the present. But he himself turned again from the quarries that were by Gilgal, and said, I have a secret errand unto thee, O king. Who said, Keep silence, be quiet. And all that stood by him went out from him. So he says, be silent, like, come speak to me in private. Charles Ellicott said, King Eglon, aware of discontent among the Israelites, he knew that there was trouble among the tribes of Israel, may have supposed that Ehud had some secret to betray his brethren. Ellicott goes on to say, the plan of Ehud, the judge that brought the dagger, the plan of Ehud was deeply laid. He wished, number one, to secure his end. Now, this would have been a very sensitive situation to be in, very nerve-wracking. He wished, number one, to secure his end, which would be more difficult amid the soldiers and attendants who would guard the king during the presentation of the tribute. Number two, to avoid endangering his comrades, and number three, to provide, if possible, for his own escape. And Ehud came unto the king, and he was sitting in a summer parlor which he had for himself alone. And Ehud said, I have a message from God unto thee. And he arose out of his seat. So the king arose out of his seat, because that was the custom back then. If someone said that they had a divine message for you, then attention was better paid. And Ehud put forth his left hand, and took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. And the haft also went in after the blade, meaning the handle of this large dagger. And the fat closed upon the blade, so that he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt came out. Couple of things to point out right here. First of all, what does it mean? The haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed up upon the blade so that he couldn't draw it out. What does that mean? Once again, Pulpit said, Ehud, feeling the necessity of killing Eglon at one blow, plunged the dagger into his body with such force that the handle went in with the blade, and he was unable to draw it out, leaving it therefore buried in his fat. Now to quickly come back to the end part of the statement, and the dirt came out. That's not meaning dirt like you and I think. Matthew Poole said his excrements came forth. His bowel, he lost control of his bowels. Not at the wound, which closed up, but at the fundament, where it would normally come out. He's messing himself. But at the fundament, as is usual when persons die, either a natural or violent death. Then Ehud went forth through the porch, and shut the doors of the parlor upon him, and locked them. When he was gone out, his servants came, and when they saw, talking about the king's servants, and when they saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked, they said, Surely he covereth his feet in his summer chamber. And they tarried till they were ashamed. And behold, he opened not the doors of the parlor. Therefore they took a key and opened them, and behold, their lord was fallen down dead on the earth. Jameson Fawcett Brown said it best, the whole circumstance of this daring act, the death of Eglon without a shriek or noise, the locking of the doors, the carrying off of the key, the calm, unhurried deportment of Ehud, show the strength of his confidence that he was doing God's service. And Ehud escaped while they tarried, and passed beyond the quarries, and escaped unto Sirath. And it came to pass, when he was come, that he blew a trumpet in the mountain of Ephraim, and the children of Israel went down with him from the mount, and he before them. And he said unto them, Follow after me, for the Lord hath delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan toward Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over. And they slew of Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty, and all men of favor, and there escaped not a man. Now what in the world does that lusty word mean? The word for lusty, John Gill said, signifies fat. There's that word again. Living in ease for a long time, and in plentiful country where these people were grown fat. And it also signifies rich men. A lot of rich men are usually fat, and others were stout and valiant soldiers. So there was a mixture of these big old fat guys, and then there were some really good soldiers in the bunch. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. And after him was Shamgar the son of Anath, which slew of the Philistines 600 men with an ox goad, and he also delivered Israel. 600 men with an ox goad, and that's pretty much all that we're told about Shamgar at all. I mean, what a mighty event. And but he was one of these other judges. He was the third of today's topic. I believe that Joseph Benson, he probably has it pretty close to what happened, a little bit more details. Benson said, It is probable that Shamgar was following the plow, because you would use an ox goad while you're plowing. It's used to poke the ox and make it keep going. When the Philistines made an inroad into the country, and having neither sword nor spear, when God put it into his heart to oppose them, he took up the instrument which was next at hand. And that would also show why he was by himself. They just show up in his field. They may have even threatened him. And the Philistines were really bad about taking Israel's weaponry. They were, you can learn that. We've went over that in previous studies, but they'd always take away their swords and their spears, their shields. So this ox goad would have really have been all that he could have used for a weapon of sorts. But my dear friends, that is it for today's study. I hope that you all learned something. As always, we have went through today Othniel, Ehud, and Shamgar. Now we're going to be picking up on Deborah next. Very fascinating woman, one of the best in history. Got a peace be with you all. Amen.